So, Sustainable Economies Law Center, for a long time, we've had a program on community owned renewable energy. And that work has changed a lot lately. It's come to revolve around two things: return of land to Black and Indigenous people, and building deeply participatory organizations. And I'm going to explain these connections because they might not be readily obvious. I mean, they weren't obvious to me for a very long time. So, starting in 2014, we were working very hard to figure out how to make it possible for everyday people to use their money, like get it out of harmful investments and put it into community-owned solar projects that the community would own and democratically control, and people could get their power from it. It sounded great. We got very focused on that, and very focused on trying to figure out all the technical and financial details. Like, trying to make this happen, it was like a nightmare. I feel like I'm waking up from a bad dream of like 8 years of wrangling with financial and technical details. And waking up from a bad dream, it's kind of like, oh man, like, whoa, that was a weird dream, what just happened? But at the same time, you kind of feel like, oh, whew, real life relief, whew. And it's like you rub your eyes and you look around and you're like, oh, things could have been so much simpler. That's how I'm feeling right now, which is actually a really hopeful feeling. So the story is, first of all, this connection. This is a really powerful one to me. Why land return to Indigenous and Black people is so critical to energy justice. First was the realization that we were starting with the wrong question. Like, we were asking, how can we meet our energy needs as communities? And I thought the answer was obvious, but no. It's like, oh, okay, so we want to build renewable energy projects, right? And we want to make sure the community controls that, and that they're not controlled by profit-oriented corporations who have an incentive to make energy cheap for themselves and expensive for us, community-owned solar. I thought it was the answer. And for many reasons that I've made other videos about and written about, and other people have written about, this is really not possible at a large scale. I mean, in short, we would tear apart the earth into shreds trying to get at all the minerals that would be necessary both for solar energy generation, but also the storage that's necessary for the whole system to work. And then also everything about the structure of our utility system and our financial system, it's designed to fight us until we transform those systems, which I still want to do. But until then, this is not possible. So we did have success in building some of these projects, especially with the amazing People Power Solar Cooperative. So there was a lot of community building that happened in this process of building a few solar projects, and that part was great. But we and other folks at the cooperative started to wonder after a while, after doing a lot of work on these projects, a lot of technical and other kind of hard work, we were wondering, in doing projects like this, are we kind of distracting ourselves from a more important and foundational question? And so rather than asking, how can we meet our energy needs, we wanted to get to this more fundamental question of like, wait, what are our energy needs? First, we need to know what are our needs? What are our needs more generally, and how can we go about meeting them? So needs like food, water, shelter, connection, a handful of other things. It's like, oh, well, how have we been meeting our needs for food, water, shelter, connection, like in ways that the planet and our ecosystem just can't sustain? So then the question becomes, well, if that's how we've been meeting our needs, are there other ways to meet our needs? And if so, who knows about that? And yeah, who out there knows about ways to meet our needs without separating all of us into single family boxes and delivering stuff to us in boxes that come on trucks, and socializing and connecting with other people through little boxes and all of that? So yeah, who knows about that? Well, first, Indigenous people around the world hold knowledge of vastly diverse lifeways that are largely not dependent on that system of separation and extraction and destruction. So Indigenous people, and then second, Black people in the US, and really people anywhere who are deeply oppressed or marginalized, have had to learn a lot about living with less consumption in general, but also have had to learn how to turn to one another, take care of one another, and heal and be resilient in the face of harm and loss. And so much of what our planet needs can begin with that wisdom and those people. But only if people have land. Only if people have land as a place to establish roots for a more connected, nurturing, and life-sustaining ways of being. And so land is where we can generate energy in so many forms. And it's through our relationships and relationships to living systems that we can actually meet our needs in countless ways. And land itself literally is like a solar panel, like sun falls on land, it warms things, the plants turn it into food, and that in turn feeds people and entire ecosystems. And the more we learn to harness those living energy systems, the less we need fossil fuels, and the less we even need photovoltaic solar systems. But again, it's only if people have land. Do people have land? No! This is a crisis situation. White people, not Black and Indigenous people, own pretty much all of the rural land in the US. And that's rural land. But what about in cities? In cities, we already have incredibly unequal land ownership because of redlining and the foreclosures and predatory lending and all these things. But meanwhile, especially since the last big recession, Wall Street has been grabbing up land. So big corporations are coming in and buying homes when they're foreclosed or just when they go on the market. And here's some data just from my community in Oakland and nearby Richmond. So we are rapidly losing land. Land is not in the hands of Black and Indigenous people. But what could we have instead? So here are two groups that we've had the honor of getting to know and working with in Oakland, Homefulness and Sogorea Land Trust. And they now have land that's stewarded by Black and Indigenous-led groups who, they bring people together, they provide food and medicine, and they're just helping people meet needs for everything: connection, joy, warmth, food, water, and so much more. And they're teaching our communities about just all the different ways that we can take care of each other. It's deeply inspiring, and so then imagine that could happen throughout Oakland, on every block, and that there'd be this loosely connected and growing network of land-based projects that begin to emerge and meet community needs in all kinds of ways. And that would then break our reliance on the destructive systems and fossil fuels. So as they become more dense, as these projects become more dense, it becomes a different kind of energy grid. It meets our needs, and it's more resilient. And the Law Center has had the joy of working with several other groups, such as these listed here, who are spreading this grid to parts of California and beyond. And it's a beautiful movement. It's become one of our highest priorities to do this work and support this vision. And then meanwhile, groups like People Power Solar Cooperative will become ever more essential in supporting those land projects to make sense of energy systems in all their forms and to meet energy needs. And People Power is already helping some of the groups that I've named figure out how to build literal solar projects. But People Power is really so much more than that. They've built a community of people who are devising all kinds of ways to meet energy needs and, just bringing skills and ideas and doing things that, we might not have thought of on our own, but collaboratively people come up with ideas, things that might surprise you. So for example, yesterday, they hosted Pancakes in the Park in a local Oakland park. And it's a subgroup of cooperative members who call themselves the People Power Battery Collective. They're a mutual aid group, and they help meet community needs, especially during power outages through the sharing of batteries. So why were they feeding people in the park pancakes? Because pancakes energize people. And that's not a metaphor. Like human connection and food, coming together around human connection and food, are literally powering the participation of those involved in the cooperative. So that brings me to another key connection for energy justice. At Sustainable Economies Law Center, in every sector we work in, we are trying to build deeply participatory organizations, meaning organizations where everyone can express their power and listen and learn from each other and make things happen together. Organizations where people self-organize and motivate each other to do things. And and engage in multitudes of projects that are really just designed for people to take care of each other, meet our mutual and collective needs as groups and as a society. And that's part of our work because it takes work. It takes a lot of thoughtful governance design, emotional labor, healing, facilitation. And it takes a lot of work because it's not business as usual. It's not what a lot of people are used to. We're supporting groups to break free from hierarchies of power that really sap our energy. And the vast majority of jobs just sap the life force for people because people don't have power. Their intrinsic motivation is suppressed. It saps our energy, and that is not a metaphor. So we recently had a lunch discussion at the Law Center, and we constructed this power plant on a Jamboard by asking people, what energizes you? And people gave all these different answers. And again, it's not a metaphor, because if we want to transform the world, we really need to tap people's full aliveness and energy. And if we want to fight fossil fuels and fight investor-owned utilities, if we want people to learn how to compost rather than send garbage away on trucks, and if we want to learn how to catch rainwater and recycle household water, we need to energize people. We need to energize each other. So here's some photos of the staff of Sustainable Economies Law Center energizing each other at a recent retreat. And we may be a bunch of lawyers who deal in law quite a bit, but there was a moment during the retreat where many of us were acknowledging how our roles and our skills as facilitators have been really essential to so much of the change work that we do. Because to facilitate is to really sense into and understand the energy that exists in a group and to help channel it. Facilitation is fostering a different kind of energy system. And more broadly, the Law Center is supporting this in other organizations. And we've helped convene groups around the US as part of the nonprofit Democracy Network. And many organizations are right now in a process of learning together to really just learn how to foster deep participation in their organizations, because it harnesses this immense power that people have in our movements for social and racial and climate justice. It taps that energy and lets us use that. And that's what People Power is doing. They're really working right now to connect people with each other and also deepen skills and knowledge, both of their broader membership, but also of their worker members. And then that helps to activate and energize people to build power in all of its different forms. And People Power is a space where people can work together and build actual solar projects or backup battery supplies or solar ovens and so much more. But it's also a space where people are building cooperative economic power. And it's a space where people can build political power, which is really critical, because what's ultimately needed is to take back the economic and political power from investor-owned utilities and let people control the grid. So that's the story of the evolution of Sustainable Economies Law Center's work on energy. And I'll link in the video notes to more in-depth writing and also videos if you want to learn more of the story. But the short of it is, we had tunnel vision and we were focusing on building community solar projects, but the system fought us at every step of the way and got us really tangled up in complexity and policy fights, and it took our time and our energy away from something more critical. Because that work really left the system unscathed. This system where wealthy corporations are grabbing up the land and they're grabbing all the power and they're sapping our energy and just taking away our capacity to survive on this planet. So we've learned a lot from the amazing organizations that I've named, that we worked with, and really just learned that no energy transformation is possible without returning land and power to the people. And more specifically, returning land to Indigenous, Black, and other frontline communities. And alongside that, or as part of that, building deeply participatory organizations where people energize each other and come together and collaboratively and creatively solve problems and basically reshape. We have to all come together and reshape our everyday lives in infinitely diverse ways. So that's our energy work, is land and power to the people.